I didn't plan on becoming a night administrator. It just happened. A temp job that turned permanent because I was the only one willing to work from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week, while everyone else complained about sleep schedules and having a life. The hotel itself was small, nothing fancy. A mid-range place near the business district, the kind where consultants, sales guys, and the occasional lost tourist stayed for a few nights and disappeared without leaving much of a trace. At night, it felt like a different world. The lobby lights dimmed, the music softened, and the city outside slowed to a low, distant hum. I liked it. The quiet. The sense that time stretched differently after midnight. That's when he first started standing out. I noticed him during my second week on the job. He checked in late, around 12:30 a.m., rolling a small carry-on behind him like he already knew the place. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark jacket, simple clothes, nothing flashy, but there was something deliberate about the way he moved. Calm, controlled, like he didn't rush because he never had to. "Good evening," I said, giving him my professional smile. "Evening," he replied, meeting my eyes a second longer than necessary. Just a second, but long enough that I felt it. I checked him in, gave him his key, explained breakfast hours even though I knew he wouldn't be there for them. Business travelers never were. He thanked me, took the key, and left without another word. I thought that would be it. But the next night, a little after 1, he came down again. Same jacket, same calm presence. This time, he didn't head straight for the door. "Quiet night?" he asked, resting one elbow lightly on the counter. "Usually is," I said. "That's the appeal." He smiled at that. Not big, just enough to change his face. "Guess you're the right guy for the shift, then." We talked for maybe 5 minutes. Nothing personal, just small stuff: work, travel, how strange hotels feel at night. Then he nodded, said good night, and left. The thing was, he kept doing that. Not every night, but often enough that I started noticing the pattern. He never came down during the day, never during the evening, only after midnight, and always when I was on shift. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. By the third time, I knew it wasn't. He'd come down, sometimes for coffee, sometimes just to stretch his legs. Always ended up leaning against the counter, always asking how the night was going. His eyes didn't wander. They stayed on me, like the rest of the lobby didn't exist. I started looking forward to it more than I wanted to admit. The job could be painfully quiet. Hours where nothing happened. Just the glow of the monitors, the ticking clock behind the wall, the faint reflection of myself in the glass doors. Then he'd appear, and suddenly the night felt awake. One night, around 2:40 a.m., he came down later than usual. His tie was gone this time. Shirt open at the collar. He looked tired in a way that suited him. "Long day?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "Long everything." I laughed, surprised at how natural it felt. He studied me for a moment, then said, "You always work alone?" "Always," I said. "Me and the cameras." "That doesn't bother you?" I shrugged. "I kind of like it." He nodded like he understood that more than he should. We talked longer that night. About why people choose night jobs. About how some conversations only happen when the rest of the world is asleep. At one point, there was a pause, one of those comfortable, dangerous silences where neither of you rushes to fill it. "You know," he said quietly, "I keep coming down here because you don't rush me." I felt that land somewhere low in my chest. "Most people don't," I replied. His eyes flicked down, then back up. "That's a shame." When he finally left, the lobby felt emptier than before. That was the night I stopped pretending I didn't notice what was happening. Because whatever this was, these glances, these after-midnight conversations, the way his voice dropped when it was just the two of us, it wasn't accidental anymore. And I had the feeling that sooner or later, one of us was going to say something we couldn't take back. After that night, things shifted subtly at first, but enough that I felt it in my body before my brain fully caught up. He started timing his visits better. Or maybe I started noticing more. Either way, it was always during the quietest stretch of the night, when the last late check-ins were done and the early morning crowd was still hours away. Just me, the lobby lights, and him. One night, he came down without his jacket. Another time, his sleeves were rolled up, forearms resting on the counter like he wasn't in a hurry to leave. He asked my name. I asked his. He told me, and I repeated it once, slowly, like I was testing how it sounded in my mouth. "Feels strange," he said. "Knowing someone's name makes it harder to stay anonymous." "Hotels do that," I replied. They make people honest when they don't mean to be. He smiled at that, but this time it didn't quite reach his eyes. We talked about work more. He traveled a lot. Different cities, same rooms, same routines. He admitted he barely noticed the places he stayed anymore except this one. Why this one? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He shrugged. Night staff's better. That look again. Direct. Unrushed. I should have changed the subject. I didn't. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and said, careful. That almost sounds like flirting. The silence that followed was sharp. Focused. Almost, he asked. My heart thumped hard enough that I was sure he could hear it across the counter. He didn't laugh. Didn't deflect. Just watched me, waiting to see if I'd back down. I didn't. From that point on, the conversations got quieter. Not shorter, just lower. More intentional. He'd stand closer. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough that I was aware of him in a way that had nothing to do with my job. One night, he noticed the book I kept under the desk. You read here, he asked. Helps pass the time, I said. And keeps me awake. What kind of books? I slid it halfway out so he could see the cover. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Didn't expect that, he admitted. Most people don't, I said. Guess I like that. He paused, then added, quieter. I like things that don't announce themselves. That sat between us for a long moment. Another night, the fire alarm went off briefly, false trigger. Nothing serious, but protocol meant I had to walk the floor and check things out. When I came back to the desk, he was still there, sitting on the lobby couch instead of leaving like everyone else had. Everything okay? He asked. Yeah, I said. False alarm. Good, he replied. I was hoping you'd come back. That was the first time he said something that made it impossible to pretend anymore. From then on, he stopped pretending too. He asked more personal questions. Where I lived. Why I took the night shift. Whether I liked it or just tolerated it. I answered honestly. He listened like the answers mattered. One night, close to 3 a.m., he said, You ever feel like nights make people braver? I nodded. Or more honest. Or both, he said. He stood up then, closer than usual, hands in his pockets, gaze steady. I don't usually talk like this with strangers, he added. Me neither. But you don't feel like one anymore. That admission hung heavy between us. I realized something then. He wasn't just passing time. He wasn't bored. He was choosing this. Choosing me. Over sleep. Over routine. Over anonymity. And I was doing the same. When he finally headed back toward the elevator, he stopped, turned, and said, I'm checking out in 2 nights. My chest tightened before I could stop it. Oh, I said. Right. He studied my face, like he was committing it to memory. I was hoping we'd talk again before then. So was I admitted. His smile this time was softer. Real. Good, he said. Then I'll see you tomorrow night. As the elevator doors closed, I stood there longer than necessary, staring at my reflection in the dark glass. Because I knew something was coming. And whatever it wasn't going to stay confined to small talk behind a front desk. The night before his checkout felt different from the moment my shift started. I noticed it in small ways. First, how often I glanced at the clock, how I kept smoothing the front of my shirt like it mattered, how every sound from the elevator made my attention snap up automatically. The lobby felt too bright, too empty, like it was waiting for something to happen. He didn't come down right away. Midnight passed, then 1, then almost 2. I told myself not to read into it, but my chest felt tight anyway. I kept replaying our last conversation in my head, wondering if I'd imagined the weight in his voice when he said he wanted to talk again. At 2:07 a.m., the elevator doors finally slid open. He stepped out slower than usual, like he wasn't sure where he was headed yet. Dark jeans. Soft sweater this time. No jacket. When he saw me, something eased in his expression, like he'd been holding his breath too. Hey, he said. Hey. I replied, trying and failing to sound casual. He came straight to the desk, resting his hands on the counter. Close enough now that I could smell his cologne, subtle and clean. He looked tired, but not in the way he had before. This was a different kind of weight. Busy night, he asked. Not really, I said. Just the usual. He nodded, then hesitated. That alone told me everything. I didn't want to go back to my room yet, he admitted. Felt too quiet. Something about that made my throat tighten. Lobby's always open, I said. Yeah, he replied. That's why I like it. We didn't jump into conversation right away. There was a pause, heavy but not awkward. Just 2 people aware that this night mattered more than the others. Finally, he said, Can I be honest with you? I met his eyes. I hope so. He exhaled slowly. I don't usually let myself do this. Get attached to places. Or people. The word people landed hard. But, he continued, something about you made it easy to forget that rule. My heart was beating fast enough that I was sure it showed. I kept telling myself I was just killing time, he said. But that stopped being true a while ago. I swallowed. Same. That was it. That was the moment where everything tipped. He smiled, small and nervous, like this wasn't something he did often. I was worried I'd misread things. You didn't, I said quietly. The air between us shifted, charged, focused. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Do you ever wish, he asked, that your job let you step out from behind the desk? I glanced around the empty lobby. Cameras humming softly. Doors locked. No one else around. Sometimes, I said. His eyes flicked toward the hallway that led to the back offices. Because I've been thinking about that all night. My pulse spiked. I shouldn't, he added, almost to himself. I check out in 6 hours. And yet, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. And yet, he echoed. We stood there, suspended in that dangerous in-between. Not touching, not moving away either. Finally, he straightened, running a hand through his hair. Can we just sit for a minute? I nodded, my body already moving before my brain caught up. We sat on opposite ends of the lobby couch at first, both of us pretending we needed space. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. Then he shifted closer. I did the same. Our knees brushed. Neither of us pulled away. This is a bad idea, he murmured. Probably, I said. He turned toward me then, really looked at me, like he was memorizing details, the curve of my mouth, the way I held myself, the fact that I wasn't backing down. I don't regret it, he said. Before I could overthink it, I replied, neither do I. His hand found mine, tentative at first, like he was giving me every chance to stop him. When I didn't, his fingers tightened slightly, warm and steady. That simple touch felt louder than any kiss could have. We sat like that for a long moment, hands linked, shoulders brushing, the quiet night pressing in around us. I should go, he said softly. Yeah, I agreed. You should. Neither of us moved. Because whatever happened next, whether it was one night or something that followed us beyond this hotel, was already too late to pretend this didn't mean something. And as the clock ticked toward morning, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a guest checking out. This was a moment that was going to stay with me long after the night ended. By the time he finally stood up, the clock behind the desk read 3:18 a.m. I really should go, he said again. But this time there was resolve in it, soft, reluctant, but real. I squeezed his hand once before letting go. That felt harder than it should have. He stood there for a second longer, like he wanted to say something else. Then he smiled, that same quiet smile that had started all of this, and turned toward the elevator. Good night, he said. Good night, I replied. The doors closed, and just like that, the lobby was quiet again. But it wasn't empty. I didn't sit down right away. I stood behind the desk, staring at nothing, feeling the echo of his presence like a low hum under my skin. I told myself it was just a moment. A nice one. One of those things night shifts give you if you're not careful. Still, when the elevator dinged again 10 minutes later, my heart jumped before I could stop it. It wasn't him. Around 5 a.m., the sky outside began to shift from black to dark blue. That strange, suspended hour when night hasn't quite let go yet. I went through my usual routine, printing reports, checking arrivals on autopilot. At 5:42, he came down for the last time. This time, he had his bag. Checking out early? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Flight, he said. Didn't sleep much anyway. He set the bag beside him and leaned on the counter like he always did. Same posture, same calm, but his eyes gave him away. Listen, he said quietly, about earlier dash. You don't have to explain, I interrupted. I want to, he said. I don't usually let myself do unfinished things. That made my chest ache in a way I hadn't expected. I don't regret tonight, he continued. But I also don't want it to feel like it disappears when I walk out that door. I hesitated. Sometimes that's just how hotels work. Yeah, he said. But sometimes they're where things start. He reached into his pocket, hesitated again, then slid a small card across the counter. No company logo, just a name and a number, handwritten. For when you're not working nights, he said. Or when you are. I don't really care. I looked down at it, then back up at him. You don't live here, I said. No, he admitted. But I come back more often than I'd like to admit. We stood there, neither of us moving, like we were waiting for permission from the empty lobby to cross some invisible line. Then he stepped around the desk. Not close enough to touch. Not far enough to pretend we didn't want to. "Take care of yourself," he said softly. "You too." For a second, I thought he might hug me or say something dramatic. Instead, he just held my gaze steady, sincere, and nodded. Then he picked up his bag and walked out. I watched him through the glass doors until he disappeared into the early morning light. When the doors slid shut, the reflection staring back at me didn't look the same as it had a few weeks ago. I slipped the card into my pocket. The shift ended an hour later. As I stepped outside, the city fully awake now, I realized something that made me smile despite myself. Some nights don't end when the sun comes up. They wait. The nights after he left were the strangest part. Nothing was technically different. Same lobby, same shift, same quiet hours where the world felt half asleep and distant. But I kept catching myself looking up when the elevator chimed, expecting to see him step out like he always did. He didn't. The first night, I told myself it was fine. He'd checked out. That was the nature of the job. People passed through, left traces, then disappeared. Still, my hand brushed the card in my pocket more than once. I hadn't called. Not because I didn't want to, but because once I did, the story would move forward. And I wasn't sure yet what shape it would take. 3 nights later, just after 1 a.m., a familiar name popped up on the arrivals list. My stomach flipped before I could stop it. Same name, same company rate, same room type. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, convinced I was imagining it. But there it was. A check-in scheduled for 12:50 a.m. I told myself not to read into it. At 12:48, the front doors slid open. He stepped inside like he'd never left. This time, he smiled first. "Hi," he said. I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. "Back so soon?" I asked, professional tone barely holding. "Turns out I forgot something," he replied, eyes locked on mine. "Oh yeah. Yeah," he said quietly. A conversation. I checked him in without comment, my fingers moving automatically. When I handed him the key, our hands brushed intentional this time. Neither of us pretended otherwise. "Same shift," he noted. "Same night crowd," I said. He leaned in slightly. "Good." He didn't go to his room right away. Instead, he came back down 15 minutes later. No bag, no jacket, just that familiar calm presence settling into the space like it belonged there. "Miss me?" he asked, casual but watching my reaction closely. I exhaled. I noticed the elevator was quieter. He smiled, genuine this time. We talked like no time had passed, like that last night had just been paused, not ended. But there was a difference now, less hesitation, less testing. He already knew where the lines were. Around 2:30, he lowered his voice and said, "I've been thinking about something." "That sounds dangerous," I replied. "For both of us," he agreed. He glanced toward the hallway again. The same one as before. "You ever take breaks?" he asked. I raised an eyebrow. "Officially." "Unofficially," he said. I checked the cameras. Empty floors. No arrivals expected. Everything quiet. 5 minutes, I said. We didn't touch as we walked. That somehow made it more intense. The staff room was small, plain, smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning supplies. Nothing romantic about it at all. But when the door closed behind us, the silence felt heavy in a different way. He turned to face me, close now. Really close. "This is where I'm supposed to say we shouldn't," he murmured. "And instead," I asked. "Instead, I'm going to ask if you want to." I didn't answer with words. When I leaned in, it was slow, deliberate, giving him time to stop me if he wanted to. He didn't. The kiss was quiet, unrushed. All the tension of the last few weeks finally landing in one soft, controlled moment. His hand settled at my waist, steady, grounding. Mine rested against his chest, feeling his breath change under my palm. When we pulled back, our foreheads stayed pressed together. "Worth the return trip," he whispered. I smiled. "Guest nights really do make people braver. Or honest," he said. This time, neither of us pretended it was just a passing moment. Because when he went back to his room before dawn, it wasn't goodbye. It was "see you after your shift." I didn't sleep after my shift ended. I tried laying in bed with the curtains half drawn, the city already loud outside, but my mind kept replaying everything. The way he'd looked at me in that small staff room. The calm certainty in his voice when he asked if I wanted to. The fact that neither of us had rushed it. By the time my phone buzzed late that afternoon, I wasn't surprised. "Him, you awake?" I stared at the screen for a second longer than necessary before replying. Me, barely. You? Him. Couldn't stop thinking about you. Simple. Honest. No games. We met that evening not at the hotel. That felt important. A quiet bar a few blocks away, dim lighting. The kind of place where conversation stayed private even when the room was full. He was already there when I walked in, sitting at the end of the bar, nursing a drink. When he saw me, his face softened in a way that made my chest tighten. Hey, he said. Hey. This time, when we hugged, it wasn't tentative. Still restrained but warmer. Familiar already. We talked for hours. Not about work. Not about the hotel. About real things. Relationships we'd avoided. Reasons we traveled. The kind of loneliness that sneaks up on you even when you're busy all the time. I don't usually stay in one place long enough to want something, he admitted. So what changed? I asked. He met my eyes. You didn't treat me like a guest. That stayed with me. After that night, he kept extending his stay. One night turned into three into a week. And somewhere along the way, the lobby stopped being the center of it all. But it still mattered. Because late at night, when the city slowed down and the hotel lights dimmed, we'd find each other there again, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting side by side, sharing the quiet like it belonged to us. One night, close to dawn, he said, You know I'm going to have to leave eventually. I nodded. I know. And you work nights, he added. Which makes things complicated. I smiled faintly. Complicated doesn't scare me. He looked at me for a long moment, then said something I hadn't expected. What if I stopped running so much? I didn't answer right away, because some questions aren't about being ready, they're about being honest. Then, I said finally, we'd figure it out. One night at a time. He reached for my hand across the counter. No hesitation now. No checking the cameras. Funny, he said. I came here because I like the anonymity. And? I asked. And I stayed because someone finally saw me. The clock behind the desk ticked steadily toward morning. For the first time since I'd taken the night shift, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to end. I felt like something was beginning. It wasn't dramatic after that. No big declarations. No sudden life-altering decisions made at sunrise. Just consistency. He stopped extending his stay night by night and instead booked a full month. Said it casually, like it didn't mean anything. Like he hadn't thought about it at all. But I knew better by then. Cheaper rate, he joked. Sure, I said, smiling. We fell into a rhythm that felt strangely normal. He adjusted his schedule when he could, staying up later on the nights I worked, napping in the afternoons so we could have time together before my shift. Sometimes we met for dinner. Sometimes for nothing more than a walk around the block, talking about things that didn't need fixing. At night, the hotel became our quiet anchor. Not just a place where we met, but where things slowed down enough to feel real. One night, while I was finishing paperwork, he leaned against the counter and said, You ever think about switching to days? The question caught me off guard. Sometimes, I admitted. Why? He shrugged. Just wondering what it'd be like to see you when the city's loud. I studied him for a moment. You'd hate it. He laughed. Probably. But there was something underneath that question. Something heavier. A week later, he told me the truth. I was offered a position, he said quietly, sitting beside me on the lobby couch during a slow stretch of the night. Here, in the city. My heart skipped. That doesn't sound like bad news. It isn't, he said. But it's permanent. I turned toward him fully. And I didn't say yes right away. That was when it hit me, not all at once, but steadily. This wasn't just late-night tension anymore. This wasn't about anonymity or passing time. This was about choice. What do you want? I asked. He didn't answer immediately, just reached for my hand, thumb brushing over my knuckles like he was grounding himself. I want something that doesn't disappear when the lights come on, he said. I'm tired of leaving. The lobby was quiet. The kind of quiet that lets words land exactly where they're meant to. I don't need promises, I said carefully. But I don't want to be another stop either. He met my gaze, steady and sure. You aren't. A month later, he moved out of the hotel. Not out of my life. He got an apartment a few blocks away, close enough that we could meet between shifts, close enough that the city still felt shared. I stayed on nights for a while longer. He adjusted. We learned each other's schedules, moods, silences. Some nights, I'd catch my reflection in the lobby glass and smile at how different things felt now. I still worked the night shift, but I wasn't alone in it anymore. Because sometimes the thing you think is temporary, the job, the hour, the conversation after midnight ends up being the one that changes everything. And it all started because one man decided to keep coming downstairs. Only to me.